Speech Acts 2.1 J.L. Austin. Austin is the person who is usually created with generating interest in what has since come to be known as pragmatics. It is not altogether clear to me why Austin's ideas on language should have been taken up so enthusiastically within linguistics, when the work of others with not dissimilar views. So it means that Austin cared about language for two main reasons. The first is language use is a central part of human activity, so it is an important topic in its own. So the next slide is, secondly, Austin's writing is admirable, clear, and accessible. And thirdly, although over the years he refined and modified his ideas considerably, his work represents a consistent line of thought. And finally, what continues to make the study of Austin's work so rewarding is that it foreshadows many of the issues which are of major importance in pragmatics today. Next is Austin's ideas on language were set out in a series of lectures which he gave at Oxford University between 1952 and 1954, and he delivered a version of these talks as the William James Lecture at Harvard in 1955. After Austin's sudden death in 1960, the lectures were brought together in book form by J.O. Armstrong, based on Austin's own, not always complete, lectures, notes, and recording of his lectures. How Do the Things with Words is therefore a rather informal book, very easy to read, and well worth reading. Austin's life, 1790 to 1859, was filled with disappointment and unfulfilled expectations. His influential friends, who included Jeremy Bentham, James Mill, John Stuart Mill, and Thomas Sirleaf, were impressed by his intellect and his conversation and predicted he would go far. However, in public dealings, Austin's nervous disposition, shaky health, tendency towards and perfectionism combined to end quickly careers at the bar, in academia, and in government service. Next slide is 2.2 Ordinary Language Philosophy. In order to understand the significance of ordinary language philosophy, you need to understand what Austin and his group were reacting against. Since the early years of the 20th century, Oxford-based philosophers such as G.E. Moore and Bertrand Russell had been concerned with the relationship between philosophy and language. So it means that kung gusto mong maintindihan ang significance of ordinary language ng philosophy, ay kailangan mong intindihin ang sinasabi ni Austin at ang kanyang mga naging kagrupo at ano ang mga naging reaksyon nila tungkol dito. The response of Austin and his group was to observe that ordinary people managed to communicate extremely effectively and relatively unproblematically with language just the way it is. Instead of striving to rid everyday language of its imperfections, he argued we should try to understand how it is that people manage with it as well as they do. Ang naging response ng mga kaibigan ni Austin o kanyang mga ka-group ay inobserbahan nila yung pakikipag-communicate nila sa isa't isa. Is 2.3 Logical Positivism and Truth Conditional Semantics. 30 Meaning and interaction between the ordinary language philosophers and logical positivist philosophers of language such as Russell. Logical positivism is a philosophical system which maintains that the only meaningful statements are those that are analytic or can be tested empirically. Logically, positivist philosophers of language, therefore, were principally concerned with the properties of sentences, which could be evaluated in terms of truth or falsity. Within linguistics, this approach was adopted within an area known as truth conditional semantics. Consider the following. There are 7 words in this sentence. And the 7 words in this sentence, example number 1 is, an invisible car came out of nowhere, hit my car and vanished. Example number 2, everyone hates Alan Elkin show because she's so popular. Example number 3, I sleep all the time, doctor. If we examine example number 1 and 2 in relation to their underlying prepositions, they will be seen to be false. Cars are not invisible and cannot come from nowhere. So it means that example number 1 is hindi makatotohanan kasi wala nga namang sasakyan na nag-i-invisible. Maliban na lang kung ito ay panibagong na-discover na may sasakyang invisible. Pero kung wala pa na-discover na gano'n, imposible ito na magkaroon ng sasakyan na nagiging invisible. And example number 2, it is not possible to be both popular and hated by everyone. Yun nga naman, example number 2, everyone hates Alan because she's so popular. Kailanman hindi nagiging hate ng mga tao ang isang tao na popular or famous. Dahil sa karamihan ngayon, kapag famous or popular ka, kilala ka ng mga tao at gustong-gusto kang kaibiganin or kausapin lagi. Hindi ka nila i-hate, maliban na lang kung sila ay may insecurity sa'yo. Ganun. Example number 3 is, anomalous in a different way. The speaker was clearly awake when talking to her doctor. Example number 3 is tama naman. I sleep all the time. Doctor. Natutulog ka, pero nakakausap mo yung doktor. Siyempre, ito ay hindi makatotohanan. Paano ka makikipag-usap kung ikaw ay natutulog? And yet, we would all recognize in these 3 examples the sort of language was used we encounter daily in casual conversation. So it means lang na kapag magsasalita tayo, dapat alam natin ang ating sasabihin upang maintindihan ng mga mambabasa at makikinig. Hindi tayo magkaroon ng pag-aalitan sa pakikipag-usap dahil tama yung sinasabi natin at tama yung naririnig ng ating kausap. Next slide is, it was often alleged by Austin's critics that he thought that ordinary language was in some way sacrosanct. This is not true. There were 2 reasons why Austin interested in the ordinary people use language in everyday life. The first reason does not really concern us at the moment, but I mentioned it for completeness and because it foreshadows in a very interesting way an approach to linguistics in general and to pragmatics in particular, which now in the mid-1990s is of major concern. It is generally accepted that one of the main tasks of philosophy is to make distinctions, and Austin believed that one good way to identify which distinctions are important or relevant is to examine how ordinary people do this in everyday language. So it means that ginawa ito ni Austin hindi lang dahil sa pakikipag-usap natin sa araw-araw. Ginawa na din ito upang may magamit tayo sa pang-araw-araw nating pamumuhay at ito ang kalimitan sa dyan natin ginagamit kapag tayo ay makikipag-usap at tayo ay makikipag-komunikasyon. And the next slide is 2.4, the performative hypothesis. So why waste time looking at a distinction which Austin himself was soon to abandon? There are 2 main reasons why it is worthwhile examining the performative hypothesis. It shows how Austin's ideas developed and it demonstrates neatly the distinction between a truth conditional approach to meaning and Austin's views of words as actions. In other words, it illustrates very clearly how and why pragmatics come into being. So it means that pinapakita dito ni Austin kung saan gagamitin at kung paano ginagamit ang mga words as actions. In other words, ini-illustrate niya kung paano naging malinaw at kung paano ito nagagamit ng mga tao at kung bakit ito mahalaga at kung bakit mahalagang malaman kung saan ito nanggaling. And the third reason is that performatives constitute a very interesting, if very restricted, subset of illocutionary verbs performatives are found. And the next slide is, Austin's first step in how to do things with words was to show that some utterances. In fact, as he later came to see, most utterances have no truth conditions. In fact, Austin claimed they are not statements or questions, but actions, a conclusion he reached through an analysis of what we term performative verbs. To understand what is meant by performative verb, compare these four sentences. I drive white a car. Second, I apologize. Third, I named this ship the albatross, and so on. And the next is, syntactically, the four sentences are similar. All are in the first person declarative. Example of declarative is rather than, say, interrogative, indicative, as opposed to be subjunctive, for example, active, rather than passive. And in the simple present tense, pragmatically, the first sentence is very different from the other three sentences. It's a statement what Austin called constative, and it is a simple matter to establish empirically whether or not the statement is true. In fact, my car is a rather pleasing metallic gray color, and if you discover this fact and hint me other sentence, you could contradict me by saying that is not true. Your car is silver. In the case of the sentence, it makes no sense at all to respond to them by saying that is not true. 2.4.1 Metalinguistics performative. There are the most straightforward examples of performatives. Like all performatives, they are self-referential. The verb refers to what the speaker of the utterance is doing. Ibig sabihin po ay kung ano ang ginagawa ng isang taong yon at kung anong tawag sa kanyang ginagawa. The verb refers to what the speaker of the utterance is doing. Self-verifying, they contain their own truth conditions, and non-falsifiable, they can never be untrue. In any language, there is probably a very small and certainly finite set of metalinguistic performative, and it is the examples in English include: number 1, I saw a withdrawal, my complaint. Second, I protest, I declare, the meeting open. Third, I object, I plead not guilty. And the fourth, I apologize, I vote to abolish vivisection. And the fifth is I deny, I move that exams be abolished. And the last is I promise, I thank the audience for their attention. And these examples are, in every example, meron siyang explanation tungkol sa kanyang sinasabi. Example is, I object, I plead, not guilty. Tinutugma niya yung kanyang mga example sa kanyang mga sinasabi. In the 34 meaning and interaction. Now, compare the following pairs of sentences. The performatives appear in boldface. A. I say that John is a liar. B. John is a liar. A. I plead not guilty. B. I am innocent. And so on. Sentences are different from John is a liar has truth conditions. In the real world, it can be shown that John is a liar. Then sentence B is true. Strictly speaking, sentence is self-verifying. Whatever words follow, I say that cannot, in strictly logical terms, be untrue. All the speaker is doing is making a statement about what he or she is saying. However, his strictly logical analysis seems to run counter to our institutions about the way in which people really do use such utterances, and I shall return to this point in section 2.48. Another is 36 meaning interaction ones. I apologize, said Angus, unapologetically. Example 5. But by the end of the meal, Angus is genuinely sorry for his rudeness and says, You must forgive me, Miss Green, Although, as I have already noted, all performatives are self-verifying. There is a difference between metalinguistic performatives and the rest metalinguistics performatives. And here are the example of this statement. And the next slide is 2.4.2 Ritual Performatives. The same automatic guarantee of successfulness does not apply to ritual performatives, nor to my third category, collaborative performatives. In section 2.4 above, I raised the question of my unilaterally deciding to rename the QE the Albatross. Austin observed that although it would make no sense to respond to such an act of remaining by saying, "That's not true yet," it would be perfectly reasonable to say, "You have no right to do that," and nobody would feel that they had to be found by what I had done. Austin observed that although performatives are not subject to truth conditions, yet they can go wrong if the felicity conditions are not observed. As in the case of remaining the sheep, the performative may be infectious or they may fall or be. It means that you need to first observe before the conditions become true. Kailangan mo obserbahan mo na yung mga performatives nila or mga subject para masabi mo na ang condition na yon ay tunay or totoo. And the next slide is the example of ritual performatives are: first, sentence you to 10 years. Second, I absolve you from your sins. Third, I baptize you. Fourth, I name the sheep. Each of these can only appropriately and successfully be uttered by a specified person in a specified situation. And this is the Felicity Conditions 2.4.2.1. Austin stated his felicity condition as follows: there must be a conventional procedure having a conventional effect. The circumstances and persons must be appropriate. The procedure must be executed correctly, completely. So, Austin means that kailangan mo maging appropriate, be executed, kailangan mo correctly or tama or completely or kompletuhin ang mga conventional procedure para magkaroon ng conventional effect. The person must have the requisite thoughts, feelings, and intentions, and if consequent conduct is specified, then the relevant parties must do it. Let us take each felicity condition in order. This condition is, in a given culture or subculture, there will be probably a conventional procedure for a couple to get married. In Britain, this involves a man and a woman who are not debarred from marrying for any reason, presenting themselves before an authorized person, minister of religion or registrar, is an authorized place of worship. In this condition A, in Britain place, merong nag-involve doon na babae at lalaki who are not debarred from marrying for any reason na walang dahilan. Presenting themselves before an authorized person, kailangan mo na lang mag-authorize sa minister of religion or registrar. An authorized place of worship, kung saan sila pwedeng ikasal. 38 meaning and interaction registry office. Unapproved time. Certain days or times a day were excluded, accompanied by a minimum of those witnesses there they must go through a specified form of marriage. The marriage is not legal unless certain declarations are made and unless certain words have been spoken. It means that ang kasal daw doon ay hindi may legal kung ang kanilang pagsasama ay ayos at hindi magulo. Magiging not legal lang yon kapag sila ay certain declarations and not have been spoken. The following extract illustrates a situation in which a marriage appears to be valid because the minister of religion had not been properly authorized. Ibig sabihin, di sila pwedeng ikasal kapag ang magkakasal sa kanilang minister of religion is not been properly authorized. Example number 2. This is a passage from a play by J.B. Priestley, When We Are Married. The story concerns 3 couples who had all been married on the same day at the same ceremony. They are preparing to celebrate their silver wedding when they are shown a letter from the minister who officiated the wedding, which reveals that they had not been properly married. So in this example number 7, ang kanilang istorya ay meron daw tatlong kinasal na parehas ang araw at parehas din ang same ceremony. Nagpe-prepare sila ng kanilang silver wedding, tapos nakatanggap sila ng letter na galing sa minister, which is not had been properly married sila kasi hindi pa authorized yung nagkasal sa kanilang minister. Is 2.4.2.2 explicit reference to felicity conditions. It is interesting to note that speakers may make explicit reference to their reasons for speaking in a particular way. This is something which often happens in pragmatics. See chapter 7. Often speakers make reference to the felicity conditions which allow them to perform a particular act. In the following example, the act in question is naming a ritual performative restricted to the best of my knowledge of the British House of Commons. And this is the example number 9. The 10th Speaker of the House of Commons, Mr. Bernard Wetherill, banned the Scottish MP, Mr. Tandela, from the House of refusing to withdraw an unparliamentary description, or Miss Thatcher, I have no alternative but to exercise the power invested in me and the other honorable member from the chamber for the remainder of the session. I name Mr. Dyler. And this is the example of explicit reference to felicity conditions. And the next slide is 2.4.3 Collaborative Performatives. Some writers have observed, see example Hunter 1979, that some performatives do not have felicity conditions in the sense that a specified person must utter the words in particular circumstances, but nevertheless, their success is not guaranteed. They require for the success the collaboration 24 particular uptake of another person, as in the following example. And here are the example number 10. Menzies Campbell, an opposition MP, had challenged the Minister of Defense using the performative, I bet you his intervention was reported the evening in the following way. So, Menzies Campbell, opposition MP, challenge siya yung minister using ang kaniyang performatives na salita in the following way. And Menzies Campbell offered to bet Mr. Refkid, and this is the example number 10, which is Menzies Campbell use. 2.4.4 Group Performatives. Some performatives are either commonly or necessarily produced by more than one person. A communique from a summit conference, a report from a committee, and most obviously a verdict from a jury in the High Court that judge responds to the statement by the foreman or forewoman of the jury by asking, and is that the verdict of you all? Group performatives may fall into any of the three preceding categories. Below are examples of a group, metalinguistic, ritual, and collaborative performative. Note that the performative in example 12 is only successful when performed on behalf of the entire community. The views of the one member of the committee would carry no weight, unlike example 11, example 12 can only be successfully be performed by the group. And here the example number 11. We three fossils vote to try and put our name in history books because it's our very own and nobody can say it's because of our grandfathers. Example number 12. This example is taken from the findings of the General Medical Council Disciplinary Committee. We do not judge you to be guilty of professional misconduct. And here the example number 13. The following example is taken from a letter which I received from British Telecom PIC. We agree to hire the equipment to you the following terms and conditions. Please check all the details if you are happy with them. Simply sign both copies of the agreement, keep the white copy, and send me the blue copy back to us the return envelope. As the final sentence makes clear, British Telecom cannot agree to the hire unilaterally. It only becomes an agreement when I indicate consent. So the example of these 2.4.4 group performatives are all about the letter of British and galing sa ibang lugar naggumawa ng letter papunta sa kanilang paroroonan. 2.4.5 Overlap of categories. As you will probably have observed by now, not all the categories are as neat or as self-contained as I have implied. For example, it would be possible to argue that many ritual performatives are also collaborative in nature. Performatives such as I baptize you are arguably only successful if a person concerned, or at least his or her representatives, is willing to accept the baptism. It means that magiging posible lang ito kung ang mga ritual performatives are also collaborative in nature. Performatives example ay, I baptize you. Ibabaptize kita. If ikaw ay nag-argue, only successful person concerned or is willing to accept the baptism. Similarly, some collaborative performatives are also fall within the category of ritual performatives bequeathing. For example, and the argument could be extended, can an announcement be made if there is no one there to hear it? Can S be said to have apologized if he refused to accept the apology? And consider the following letter. The letter is example number 14, Sunday 40th day of August, to whom it may concern. And this is the letter of example number 14. I, Thomas Benjamin Swift, now on this day of Sunday in the year of our Lord, 1901, do hereby confess that the murder of Molly Brown made of his establishment we had meetings, and she threatened to reveal that she had conceived. This I could not allow. Now I cannot live with the burden of my guilt any longer. The letter was written in 1901 but was hidden under the floorboards in the maid's room and not found until June 1994. Miss Brown was never reported missing. Nobody was ever found. Mr. Swift was never charged with anything. Can we seriously accept as a genuine confession a letter which was seen by no one until 93 years after the murder was committed? Seems that confusing can only succeed if at least one person hears and understands what has been said or written of speech. Acts require some degree of hair uptake in order to succeed and can thus be as in collaborated. And this is all my part, Cecil Ebora. And the next is Janelle Ambal. And thank you for listening.